Welcome to the second episode of the Dev Diary of Nanuka Secret of the Shattering Moon. In the first episode, we shared our inspiration behind creating this colorful puzzle platformer in pixel art and discussed the early design and prototype phases. In this episode, we have a lot of exciting updates on our development progress. We'll begin with insights into our day-to-day project management style, which we refined over the last year and a half to boost efficiency and ensure constant progress. Here is what's coming up in this episode. An update on the implementation of level 3, an overview of the early concept for future levels, a technical segment for the coders out there, the workflow for integrating sprite animations into the game, and as a special treat for those who watch until the end, bonus content on how we handle audio compression in our custom engine. Make sure you watch until the end for all these exciting updates. One of the great lessons we learned during the development of our latest game, Full Void, is that sharing responsibilities is better than having a single project manager assigning tasks and evaluating results. As you might know by now, our development team is composed of myself, handling the programming, along with Leo and Tom, who are the pixel artists and animators. Every week, during our Monday morning meetings, we appoint one of us as the project manager for that week. These roles rotate unless someone is on holiday. The project manager for the week is responsible for assigning tasks and monitoring progress. As a small team, we don't use fancy software to manage our tasks. We just compile our to-do list in a shared text file and ensure everything is defined at the beginning of the week, aiming to be realistic with deadlines. On Friday afternoons, we sit down to evaluate the performance of the project manager. We use a few simple indicators to discuss the performance. Alongside the actual accomplishment of goals, we evaluate management style, team motivation, and how unforeseen circumstances were handled. This process is never about pointing fingers or placing blame. The focus is always on what is best for the project. We humbly discuss what went right and what could be improved. Over the last year, this approach has helped us improve our management skills and grow more empathetic towards whoever is in charge, understanding exactly what it means to be in their shoes. If you want to see the complete list of key metrics we use for evaluating the performance of our project manager, check the description below. And while you're there, like this video and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of the insights we share on game development. So let's start with the first week included in this episode, when I was the project manager. Hello and welcome to a new week of development of Nanuka Secret of the Shattering Moon. As we discussed, we take turns being the project manager for each week. This week it was my turn, and we set up a bunch of goals for the week. The main goals were to review the design of level 3 and then implement every screen in level 3 with placeholder graphics. Also making sure the progression was good, and then we connect all the elements with the story. And also to keep moving forward the design of other locations and establish the look for each location with some reference art. So this level is the first real level after the introduction of the game. So there are a couple of levels where you play a bit of the story and where you learn to control the main character. Leo and Tom did most of the design of this level, and I have to say it came out really well. So they gave me all the placeholder art and all the grid and the references, and I put together the level in the code. We did different iterations on the level. First with the grid, then with some placeholder art, and then with a bit more refined but still placeholder art. And then they exported each individual elements that would be part of the gameplay for me to code the behavior and make sure the level was playable from start to finish. It was very exciting. I really enjoyed this week. One of the items Leo and Tom came up with was a kind of a moving platform, but with a twist, because obviously all the objects in the level are linked with the actual level design and story. So the idea with this platform is to go from A to B and can move horizontally and vertically, and it could be deactivated or activated with the interaction with other elements on the screen. So you can interact with an element and the platform becomes active and starts moving. At the beginning, before coding, I had a chat with the guys, and that was really good because it turns out they were planning to use moving platforms in later levels, which don't just move horizontally but also move vertically, and they move across different points. So before starting to code the object, I decided to make it so the object would be flexible and could move through a list of points. So the behavior will be moved from A to B, then wait, then from B to C, and so on and so forth. This way I can make the platform move in any direction. So that was one of the challenges, to make sure the object itself was flexible enough to be used in later levels. The other challenge was to make sure all the platforms are synchronized with each other. So if you got two platforms, they move in different directions, you want to make sure they don't get offset in time because of running errors and stuff like that. And then that will make the level unplayable. The other advantage of synchronizing all the game objects is that for speedrunners, they know they can start the level at the checkpoint and the game will behave in a consistent way. So that was important. So I spent some time making sure everything, all the objects are synchronized with the level time or the checkpoint time, making sure this was rock solid so the player never gets stuck. Another challenge with the moving platform was making sure the player was anchored to the position of the platform, because if we don't take into account the movement of the platform and the position of the player at the initial state, then you can end up with the player kind of shaking on top of the platform, which is not nice to see. So I made sure to account for all the running errors in the movements of the platform and the players, so the player looks nice and solid on top of the platform.
Design-wise, for this level, our moving platform looks like an umbrella. It's inspired by a Japanese yokai. We have this theme of ghosts ongoing throughout the level. One of the features of our moving platforms is that you can toggle them on and off by interacting with something. Our initial idea was that these umbrellas would fall asleep and go to a certain spot in the grid. As we integrated them into the actual game, we realized that there was a lot of workaround that wasn't really necessary, and we instead changed the design to the umbrella turning into a little spirit that still hovers in its position. That way the gameplay is still clear and it fit the theme even more than it originally did. For most of the week, Tom and I worked on the design of the next few levels, figuring out what the general aesthetic should be, the color palette, and things like that. Our goal with this game is to have, art-wise, a mix between a completely custom drawn experience and something still somewhat tile-based to make it a manageable task. So this week we worked on figuring out the different assets that we will need to construct these levels. On my end, I managed to finish level 7 this week with placeholder graphics, which we will then give over to Ali to implement into the game with the grid, so we can test out if the level is enjoyable or not.
As Leo was working on some of the other levels, I was working on level 6, which involved the tea house with new puzzles compared to the other levels. But my main focus this week was on some of the secrets and boss designs. So this involved designing the appearance of the boss as well as the mechanics of how they'll fight you during the boss fight. So this included not only the main boss at the end of the level, but we also have some other secrets throughout the level and also a mini boss that you'll fight, which is based off the kitsune. So we're trying to look more into like the lore and the mythology behind the kitsune and incorporate it so that the mechanics of the boss and the appearance are quite fitting to that legend.
I was project manager this week. Our goals for this week were to have Ali implement the new levels that we designed last week, while Tom and I worked on creating more backgrounds and more assets for the existing levels that we designed. And if we managed to finish that before the end of the week, we wanted to start working on the concepts for the newer levels. At the start of the week, we managed to finish the placeholder graphics for the lower area of the bamboo village, which then Ali worked on implementing.
And I worked on the placeholder graphics for the section after the lower section, which we're calling the tea house section, which involves an indoor area with new puzzles introduced here. One of them, for example, which I started to animate the placeholders for, is a ghost enemy which we'll be using to solve certain puzzles.
While Tom worked on the tea house level, I started concepting out the next levels. Our general idea for that location was for it to be a snowy village with a lava river. We also refined the story and replanned some of the main points of the plot during the middle of the week.
So midweek we did an interview, and it was a lovely interview with lots of very nice questions. One of these was about the ally of the main character that we feature on the hero image on the Steam page. Obviously we feature Nanuka, and next to her there are a bunch of characters, and we were asked, okay, are those characters going to take part in the gameplay? And obviously we always wanted to feature those characters in the game, that's why we included them in the hero image. But the question was really nicely put, and it kind of got us thinking about the specific ways we are planning to incorporate the allies into the gameplay. So we knew we wanted to have them in the story. I really have to thank the interviewer. I'm very thankful that she triggered these discussions at this stage, where we started talking about it among us, and we really love what we came up with. So we did kind of a brainstorming session where we explore all the ways in which we could use the allies. And I think we stumbled upon a concept, in my opinion, quite unique. I think it's a great way to use your ally in a way that doesn't take away from the main character, from Nanuka, but they are going to feature in the gameplay and help you out, but the player will still be in control. It's very hard to explain. It will make sense once we are able to show this system in practice in the game. We think it's a really good idea and it's going to play really well. So we're very excited about this idea and can't wait to develop it further. This was a very enjoyable week for me. Once you got the core of the game running, I really love adding new elements to the game and the gameplay, adding new objects that interact with the player and the environment. So this week, at the beginning of the week, I was still implementing the upper part of the bamboo village, and I managed to finish and then move on to the other section. So sometimes we don't work on levels in the order the player is going to play them. We just implement them in whatever order we feel is appropriate for the gameplay and for what's ready at that particular stage. I was very excited to then finish another section of the bamboo village, which is more the lower section, which featured lots of very interesting objects that had to be added to the gameplay. Things like objects fall from the sky, and other objects you interact can affect the enemies in that specific section. And there was a lot of fun to do. It was nice to go from idea to implementation. I also got to implement the ghost that Tom has been working on, so it gave me the graphic for like kind of a placeholder art for the ghost object. But it was actually quite a bit more than placeholder. I think it looks very cute and it works. It's got all the states I need, a very nice animation. It's a great placeholder.
For those who are curious about our workflow with integrating sprite animations into the game, since we have a custom engine serial box, we can export the stripes in any way we want and import them in any way we want. Ali came up with this chunk system where essentially we can have the entire sprite animation in one file, and we use a color that we wouldn't use in any other drawing, so the code can detect it, to separate the chunks within that file. That way we can have less files cluttering the artist's end of the workspace, and Ali can still have a very good overview of how to split up the animation and integrate the different pieces of animation and transitions into the final object in the game.
One of the things we want to do at the company, we want to make sure our games have a lot of content and they pretty much don't have any loading time, if we can avoid it. So far we managed. If you play any of our previous games, Super Arcade Football, Super Arcade Racing or Full Void, the game starts and then there is zero loading time after that. To achieve it, we need to make sure all the images, animations and audio are compressed. I was never happy with the previous audio compression, so I decided to take some time to work on a new audio compression. Nanuka is going to feature a lot more audio compared to Full Void, so I want to make sure the game is still super quick to load and it's got lots of content. And for that, one of the things I did on mine was to try different strategies to compress the audio. Basically, I started writing the encoder to convert from a WAV file into our own file format, which is called OOS, OutOfTheBit sound. And the idea is to be able to store sounds as 16 or 8 bits, depending on the quality we want, and then be able to use stereo or not. And also make an entire song, if we want to, with different slices of audio, so we can have kind of patterns. For instance, we can have the start of the song, then we can have a middle section that we can loop for a certain amount of time, and then we can have an end part of the song. We can have more parts to it or variations. Let's say we start a combat sequence, maybe we start a new song. And then as the combat intensifies, maybe we swap to a different version of the song live. Where all the the music is more intense. So we want to make sure to have that dynamic audio in the game, and to allow it, I need to make sure I have the new file format, and then I need to write the player that uses those slices of audio to compose the songs. And I'm working closely with Robin to make sure we agree on the audio and then where to cut the songs, so we can piece all the songs together and make them really dynamic in the game. Thank you for watching the second episode of the Dev Diary of Nanuka Secret of the Shattered Moon. We hope you enjoy hearing about our project management style, the progress on levels development, and some insight into more technical aspects. Your feedback means a lot to us, so please let us know what topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Leave a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe. Next time we share more about the abilities we are designing for Nanuka's allies and how they'll help her on her adventure. Plus, we start talking about our marketing for Nanuka, a very important aspect of indie dev that is often overlooked by small indie studios. See you in the next episode.
As Leo was working on some of the other levels,
I'm just laughing.